Hello everybody, my name is Dave Jackson, and you're listening to Tales from the Backlog. This is a video games deep dive review podcast where each week I'm joined by a guest to bring a game out of the backlog, play it, and discuss. My guest today is a friend of the show, a writer whose work can be found on RPG Site, IGN, and more, as well as the host of RPG University podcast and the one rightful king in the land. Welcome to the show, Scott White.
Oh, thank you so much, Dave. It is an honor to be on the show. It is fantastic that we are both plague-free and we can finally record this. I've been so excited. It has been quite the adventure getting to this point, to this recording. So very, very excited.
It is a long process to get through this game we're talking about today, and then another long process to get to recording day, but we're here, and today we're going to talk about Metaphor ReFantazio, which is an RPG developed by Studio Zero. They are a sub-studio of Atlus, and it was published by Atlus for basically every contemporary thing except for the Switch in 2024. Was directed by Katsura Hashino and produced by Junichi Yoshizawa. And if this is your first time listening to the show, first of all, thank you for stopping by. And here's the spoiler policy. So we are not going to spoil anything major story stuff for a while. If you haven't played Metaphor, you can listen for quite a while, I bet, in this episode without fear of story spoilers. And then we'll warn you when spoilers are coming. You can also check down in the show notes for when the spoilers begin. There's timestamps down there and everything too. So until then, you're safe. If you clicked on this episode and you don't know what Metaphor ReFantazio is, we have some quick elevator pitches for the top of the show. I say that Metaphor is a game where you can engage in fun life sim gameplay and turn-based combat while reliving your election trauma. Scott, what about you?
I say it's a fantasy RPG that feels more based in reality than its sibling or cousin RPG that is set in modern-day Japan with a pretty damn good job system.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. Lots to dig into. Lots of, I'm sure, other comparisons that we'll make to the Persona series as we go on. Especially me, because I finished this game and jumped straight into Persona 4 Golden. So I have a little contrast going on with those two games. But we'll get there. Quick stats, first of all. I played this on PC. I switched between PC and Steam Deck. It was flawless on both platforms. Took me 82 hours to beat this game. Scott, how about you?
I played it on PS5, but I also used my Steam Deck with Chiaki, which let me remote into my PlayStation, and I clocked in around 96 hours, but I also love to grind in RPGs, so.
Yeah, my 82 hours, just from anecdotally, talking to people, is on the lower end, I think, of playthroughs of this game. It's a very long game. And then depending on how much you grind, how many side quests you do, how many people you want to talk to, it can get up there for sure. But let's rewind. We start the show usually by talking about our histories with the game, why we wanted to play it, and then I think it's pretty relevant to talk about our history with Atlus and Studio Zero, the Persona series, Shin Megami Tensei, and stuff like that. So, Scott, you were on this right when this game came out, I think. So, what was your history with the Studio, Persona, those other series?
Oh, yeah. With Studio Zero and more modern day Persona games, I really got hooked on these games back with the original PS2 release of Persona 3, like even before FES. I have a funny story, a memory of renting Persona 3, my mom coming in, and for those that you haven't played it, you use an evoker which looks a lot like a gun to use your magic, and they put their gun or their evoker to their head, they pull the trigger, and they cast magic. It's very gratuitous, I would say. But I remember my mom walking in to the living room when that happened, and she was like, did that kid just shoot himself in the head? And it's like, no, Mom, he's casting magic. Yeah. But ever since then, Persona 3 Portable is the one I really spent a ton of time on, but Persona 4, Persona 5, I absolutely adore. So yeah, from the moment this was the first little tease of it with the concept art of the red-haired knight girl years ago, I was like, I am so in. And yeah, I got to preview it. I got my cool notebook, my already, but yeah, I was in day one. Love this. Love it. Love the team.
I was also in on day one on this, and it was just from playing Persona 5 Royal a couple years ago. It's one of the early episodes of this podcast is Persona 5 Royal. But I had never heard of Atlus until I played Persona 5 Royal a couple years ago.
Really?
Yeah. So I didn't have a PS2 or I didn't have a PlayStation until PS4. So it was just out of my realm. None of my friends talked about Persona or Shin Megami Tensei or anything. So, I bought a PS4. I Googled best PS4 games, and it's all Persona 5, play Persona 5. So I did, and it was awesome. And so then kind of like you said, as soon as I saw what Metaphor looks like, it was a big trailer they showed at maybe the Game Awards or something like that. And you could just see the style, the art direction and everything. And I was like, oh yeah, they got all the praise for the art direction in Persona 5. And they're like, wait till you see this. We're doubling down. So this was I think anytime I did a kind of most anticipated games or something like that, this was always way up there. So it was day one for me also. I was also interested in the fantasy aspect, leaving the high school setting. I'm not mad at the high school setting. I'm playing Persona 4 Golden right now, and I'm enjoying it. But it is cool to see the same teams take the same structure and do a totally different thing with it. So this was a no-brainer day one purchase. I played the demo ahead of time, stuff like that. So to do our quick opening thoughts here at the top of the show, this is right up there with Persona 5 as far as, my favorite RPGs. I really, really enjoyed this. And I enjoyed this a lot more from a gameplay perspective than from a story perspective, personally. There's a lot of stuff that the story does that I think is really cool and really great. And there's a lot that's kind of cool, but, very surface level. We'll talk about that stuff as we go, I think. But the gameplay, the dungeon crawling, the job system, all of that stuff. There's some real sicko shit that this game got me thinking about when I was planning, how do I want to spend my time and stuff like that. I really love that. So even if I wasn't always on board with the story, and it's not like the story sucks, it's cool. I like it. But, if we're doing an analysis or something like that, there's some stuff that I don't think is as good as it could have been. Despite that, really good game. This was in my top 10 for 2024 pretty easily. How about you?
Yeah, I'm very much in the same boat. I am a sicko and a diehard fan of any turn-based RPG that incorporates a job system. I just think that inclusion offers so much in way of replayability and challenge runs, and really, and especially in this game where you have to think about your party, what jobs you're going to equip to be able to tackle, especially bosses and things I'm sure we'll talk about later. But yeah, like you said, yeah, there were some good twists, and maybe had this come out not in a year where we had a highly contentious election, where anxiety was through the roof everywhere, and it might have hit a bit different. But playing through it hit a little too close to the chest in some regards. And honestly, outside of the battle track, the battle theme song with the chanting, the soundtrack didn't do much for me. I cannot hum a track from this game, but Persona 5, Persona 5 is still above this game for me. But I think this is such a departure from what Studio Zero normally does, and I think they still knocked it out of the park in a lot of regards. I can't wait to see what Metaphor 2 is like. But yeah, still a great game. Like you, this is definitely one of my top 10 games of last year. Yeah, it's great, and I can't wait to see how they continue to build on it.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a lot of things to dig into, so we're going to take a music break. We'll listen to some of that soundtrack, and when we come back, we are going to set up the story in Metaphor ReFantazio. Metaphor ReFantazio begins by allowing you to name your protagonist. Just like in the Persona games, I named my protagonist Rolando, as I always do. Dark Tower fandom comes out whenever I get to name a protagonist. You also get to name yourself, and the game specifically says, you who is playing the game, what is your name? And so you enter that in there too. So there's a little bit of a meta thing going on right from the beginning, not a spoiler, literally 30 seconds into playing the game, you'll see it. Your protagonist, who in English is voiced by Caleb Yen, is on a quest to heal a curse placed on a childhood friend who is secretly the prince in hiding of the kingdom of Uchronia. There's a kind of like main menu cutscene when you first boot up the game. Before you hit any button, you'll see a cutscene play out that shows the king of Uchronia being assassinated by a character named Luis Guillaburn, who's voiced by Joseph Tweedale. I want to shout them out. Good voice acting there for Luis. And then later on, we'll get into the plot a little bit more as we go. But so you have your prince in hiding who's been cursed. Your character's trying to heal the prince. You've got your fairy advisor named Gallica that goes along with you, plays the kind of like battle support role that, you know, like Teddy or like Morgana or something like that in the Persona games. So we haven't even gotten into like what the game is about, but there's a lot going on here. Starts with the king being assassinated, like not even in like the events of the game. This is pre the game. So we have a kind of succession plot going on. What did you think about just this kind of, we're going to heal the prince. Luis is obviously evil, stuff like that.
I liked how it didn't waste any time to establish why you were doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
Coming from Persona, where it can take a few hours before you get, okay, this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. This is like, okay, king got assassinated, you're going to do something about it. It's just like, hit the ground running, you're going. Within the first 5 minutes, I feel like after the cutscenes, you're running around monsters and doing things. It wastes no time, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it also it doesn't really waste time getting into like the main kind of plot story thread of the game too. So you have like, you're going to try and rescue the prince. We know as the players, because we see the cutscene where Luis kills the king, but the people in the world don't really know that. So we have a little bit of thing where they're catching up to us. And eventually, because the king is assassinated, there needs to be a new king because his heir is cursed and cannot take the throne. So what happens is the king, through this, what they call royal magic in the game, the king kind of lifts the royal palace above the ground with this magic, got this giant face, the king's face on the bottom of this thing. And it's just kind of like staring, watching at everybody. And it explains that they're going to use this democratic process to select who the next king is. Whoever wins over the heart of the most people in the land will become the next king. So we get like this race, this election to become the next king, and you figure out this is going to be the thing that will allow you to get closest to Luis, is if you enter the race. So this is the basic plot for most of Metaphor, is this election, this kind of contest to see who's going to become the next king.
Yeah. Just thinking back to playing this with the impending election was really kind of a nutty, experience. Yeah, I can't. First of all, like it's Japanese creators, and like not to pretend that everything revolves around the American election, but like the timing was pretty conspicuous, right? Like this game came out like a month before the election or something. And what was funny is I went to a press preview for this game where a bunch of the development team was there, and this was talked about, and it's like, we really didn't do this on purpose.
Yeah.
We had no idea any of this was going to happen. And to their credit, I don't think they did either.
Right.
It was just ironic. It irony.
Yeah. Game development takes so long that it feels like a really weird accident that it happened in such close proximity. But that election storyline then did kind of hit possibly harder than it would have if this game came out 2 years ago or something like that, where you have Luis, who's the antagonist in the story. He's running in the election, and he's the favorite, and he's a real piece of shit, like openly a piece of shit. and he still has a bunch of people who support him, and it's an uphill climb to kind of like show people that his way is not the way and stuff like that.
Yeah. The blind faith that some people, like his followers, have in him, and just the rabid nature of their support.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was. And shout out to Joseph Tweedale. I think he nailed the performance. I think the performance of all the characters, in my opinion, for the English voice cast did a fantastic job.
Yeah, they did a great job. Luis in particular is like a very good villain, like really, really good. All the way up through, how it eventually, how the game eventually goes through the story. I was completely sold on Luis as a villain, Luis as a powerful, mage, everything like that. Whenever there was a confrontation, we'll say, I was like, oh, I don't know how this is going to go. Like, I was like legit nervous for how things were going to turn out for the characters on the strength of the writing and performance for Luis, basically.
Yeah.
There's other candidates in the race too. So like we have our protagonist character, we have Luis. There are other candidates too. It starts out with a bunch. It eventually gets down to about 3, and then, yada, yada, yada. We'll save that for the spoiler section. But the other candidates were pretty hit and miss with me. I wasn't a fan of, like, none of them really felt like believable candidates that would ever, like present anything that would get a bunch of support. I don't think. Like, you meet them on the road and, they're all single issue, people running for king or whatever. Like, this is like, I come from this race that's been oppressed, so my platform is only this race is going to have a good life when I'm the king or something like that.
Yeah.
Those other characters were a little bit less, in my opinion.
I agree. They didn't really add anything outside of another little side game you could do to get stat points, because you could bait them. Yeah, I mean, one of them was going to give everyone like a free 6-pack or something. Like, like just get everyone drunk was one of their points. One of them is like, only beautiful people will have any power in my, when I'm the king and stuff like that. Yeah. Very forgettable. Like, I might be like, I can pick out their faces, but outside of that, I couldn't tell you the names of any of them except Katharina, who is one of those this game's kind of confidant kind of things.
the social bonds. Yeah, for sure. But what did you think of like the plot in general? Like, as a, did you have fun going through this? Did you enjoy the twists and turns, stuff like that?
Yeah, I think in many ways it felt like a very safe fantasy RPG narrative. But at the same time, I think it had some good twists and turns that I wasn't expecting. I like how it avoided some fantasy RPG tropes, and I like how it approached other things. But I think it was fine. Like you said it kind of earlier on in the show. Yeah, it's good. Like, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed my time with it. Had I not enjoyed it, I wouldn't have spent the 96 hours. Good job system or not, I wouldn't have spent that much time, especially with a toddler, to play through it. But yeah, I think it was fine. It was a good story.
Yeah, I think it's pretty. I think it starts out really strong, as we said, and I think that at about like the 50-hour mark, it starts to like really pick up again. I was pretty bored by the story in the middle of it. There were times in, like, the game's fucking 90 hours long, so like I think there's bound to be points like that. But it did happen for like extended time, like dozens of hours, where I was like, can something please happen in the story here? Like, something of substance please happen. And for a game this long, like whenever you have a game this long, I feel like I shouldn't go that long without while having that feeling, As far as themes, the story does touch on a lot of like really interesting thematic content too. So like, if the plot is not going, maybe they're exploring some themes or something like that. You mentioned anxiety at the top, and we can just kind of touch on that at the beginning. That's something that the director of the game like specifically said, this is the theme of Metaphor, is anxiety. And so kind of like how people deal with it, how it is used and taken advantage of during elections, especially. And then there's other stuff, more fantastical stuff, we'll say, that we'll save for the spoiler section. There's also this kingdom of Uchronia is not a land where everyone is created equal. There is prejudice, there's racial injustice. There are a bunch of different tribes, and all of them have issues with other ones. There are some that are seen as lesser, including the tribe that your character comes from, the Elda, which are like the lowest on the totem pole. They're seen as cursed. So everyone kind of hates you just for the fact that you are Elda, and that makes your campaign harder as you go, just because people see you and they're like, well, I'm not trusting that guy. What did you think of these two things, kind of specifically how they relate to like this election storyline, the anxiety of the people, and then, we have like, it's weird. We have like this democratic process to select a new king, but the tribes don't like fully trust each other. They're not united in any way, stuff like that.
Yeah, I still get a chuckle with the idea is, in metaphors, anxiety gives you superpowers, because I just imagine how many superheroes and peoples with powers we would have right now and last year.
Basically everyone
would have superpowers. Yeah. But yeah, it's an interesting look at things, but this is one of those things why I describe this as hitting more. This feels like a hit was more based in reality than like a Persona, which actually takes place in a real world place.
Yeah, I can see
it's because, and I hate harping on the fact that it's just like in the news cycles, there's always seems to be racism shown, or groups hating one another, or confrontation. And then to go to a fantasy RPG where it just bombards you over and over with that, it's like, okay, I get it. There's I get it. But I mean, that's what the game is, and I think they present it. I don't know if I would necessarily present it the best in every situation, but I think they do it okay. Like, I don't think they also necessarily sugarcoat it. But yeah, it wore on me. I'll admit, like, there were parts where I felt like they were just beating me over the head with these concepts, and it was kind of like, okay, I get it.
Yeah, I think this ties in with the characters that kind of form up your party. So specifically talking about how this world is made up of these tribes who are not created equal in the eyes of everybody else. So basically you go around and your party becomes like one person from each of these tribes or these races around the land. And, your character is like this unifying force of nature, basically. And it partly comes from this book that they're reading throughout the game, where they have this book that's heavily based in video viewers can see Scott's got the book heavily based on Thomas More's book Utopia. And so the book that your character reads describes this perfect world, this perfect society, basically, where everyone is created equal. There's no injustice. Everyone has equal rights, yada, yada, yada. And so like you get people to join your cause and join your party by like showing them the book. And like something that I had a hard time like really getting my head around is the fact that the people read the book and then suddenly they're like, wow, that's amazing. Like I never thought that this was possible. Where like it was kind of hard for me to like, suspend disbelief that like, even though they're living in this world that is not just by nature, how would you not even consider that this, like, how could you not fantasize about this at least?
Yeah. It's like, oh, equal rights? Everyone's treated the same. What? That's crazy talk. What a wild world.
Yeah.
No magic? What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they join your party because like you introduce the concept of like a world without racism to them, basically. And like that thing is just that. This is kind of what I mean when I said like a lot of the thematic stuff is touched on, but like it's really not that deep to have people join your party because you're campaigning for equal rights. Like they don't really go super deep with this thing, and eventually it kind of gets thrown to the side as the story goes along. And also the characters that join your party are all like the shining example of their specific race. Like, with the exception of like one of your characters that doesn't like one of your other characters because they're, you know, of a certain tribe or something, everyone that joins your party is like, yeah, I'm changed. I'm all for this. When like the rest, everyone else, you know, where they come from is like, nah, I don't like these people. But everyone that joins your party is like this perfect soldier, and your main character is the most perfect moral person who has ever lived. And that stuff, like, there's a reason for it. We'll talk about it later. But like that stuff, it was all just like everybody seems a little bit too perfect, and they all have problems. But with the exception of one of the characters, their problems are really not that serious. Like Heismei's storyline is the one that people grab onto, I think, because it's the only one where I'm like, yeah, this character's actually been through some like really tough stuff. Everyone else, like, I don't really, you know, I'm not really too involved, but they're all so perfect. And I kind of compare it to, like I said, I'm playing Persona 4 Golden right now, and some of your party members in Persona 4 are like kind of pieces of shit.
Yeah.
And it makes them feel like more real people. I like the characters in Metaphor, but I didn't always like believe them as people, you know?
I mean, one of them's basically this world's version of Taylor Swift.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something weird with her too. Very weird. That maybe we can talk about later. But what did you think of the party members? Because that's a really important part in a game like this.
Yeah, and I guess maybe it's because I've played and like I love RPGs so much, but I feel like this is par for the course. Like they are the paragons of their station, or it's like, okay. I thought it was, I like the characters, but like you said, they're equal rights. That's wild. Can I just read your book? Oh, that's wild.
Yeah.
I'm gonna change. This is what I'm gonna do. And I think this goes back to the story. It's like, yeah, this is fine. This is very much a RPG story. It lightly touched on a lot of sensitive subjects, I guess, but they never really dove hard into it, I guess, in some ways. Yeah, I mean, it was okay. It's good. There's
a couple subjects that I think they actually did do a good job of exploring. Like, I think that what they do with the anxiety storyline during the election, I thought that was good. It takes a while to get there, but I think that it was pretty good. I liked their kind of talk about idealism and, you know, working towards a better world, working towards utopia, as it kind of, that book again inspires the people around your character to join the cause. I think the game actually has some really interesting things to say about idealism and like people who fight the good fight and what happens with them and stuff like that. I thought that was really good. So it's not like it's all super surface level, but it's, you know, some of the stuff that they introduced first, like the racial injustice and stuff like that, I think that is pretty surface level and pretty ultimately disappointing. Some of the other things came out later as we played, which I did think were really good. Was there anything about like other, you know, thematic stuff, maybe the idealism, or, you know, this game talks about the effect of fantasy inspiring people to make real world change, stuff like that. Did any of that stuff hit for you?
It did, because I have been so influenced by video games and anime and comics growing up that I always loved that underdog fight. I love that sense of, okay, I can change it. And I 100% believe that even like fiction media or anything can really inspire and invoke that drive to do better. And I think that was relatable. I know that like in high school or things, when I would be feeling down or something, I had like a playlist of hype up music from various movies or animes or video games that I would play. And I cried when reading science fiction or fantasy books before. I felt anxiety from watching movies. So I understand that even things that aren't real, that are made to just be enjoyed, can inspire and invoke emotions. So I thought that was I like how they handled that idea of utopia and fantasy as reality and vice versa. And that it can inspire people. I thought that was cool. There's a cool angle for it.
Yeah, for sure. And it's one of like the main things about the game is like I kind of joked about how I didn't fully believe that like just reading this book is suddenly like blowing all the party characters' minds about like, oh, this is a thing that is possible out there. But the message behind that is definitely true. Like you can read a book and be inspired to make the world around you a better place because of something that you read. I just didn't buy that it was like such a big thing to imagine a world where there's no racism.
Yeah.
You like could not imagine that before you read that book. But like, I think the message behind that is good.
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. It's like people being treated normally regardless of their race or skin color or their ear shape or whatnot. Shouldn't be that far-fetched that they need a book to start forming or having those ideas.
Right. To even conceive of the idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Other stuff, there's a heavy influence from Carl Jung, as you might expect from the people who make this game. We might talk about that a little bit more in the spoiler section, but if you enjoyed that in the Persona games, it's here in full effect in Metaphor as well. Do you get down with the Carl Jung analogies in these games?
Not familiar, no.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot that like I just learned about it, like a couple years ago, still skimming the surface, but like playing Xenogears taught me some stuff, and then now you see it. And the director of the game, like specifically, I remember, I think it was Brian Shea who did a little interview with them, and the director was like, wow, someone asked me, finally I can talk about this. So it's a big source of influence for sure. Did you have any other like thoughts about the story, the characters, anything like that before we kind of put a pin in story stuff?
I absolutely love Neris, who's your crazy captain.
Oh yeah, he's great.
I loved his character. He was the comic relief, and 9 times out of 10, anytime he would pop up or do something, I'd laugh and would give me that. Oh, okay. Like I just loved him. He was just silly.
Yeah, he's great. A lot of the characters are really fun to talk to. Talking about their character traits, they might not be super believable to me as like people. They're too nice, I think, but they are fun characters. And I ended up, finishing the game really liking most of them. And shout out to, Heismay is the one people are going to talk about the most, I think, but I enjoyed Hulkenberg a lot. I enjoyed Heismay. I enjoyed Yufa when you meet her. Yeah.
I don't know
Did you
if
have
this
any favorites?
I loved I love that Hulkenberg was a foodie.
Yeah.
I thought that was just silly. Her
and not just like
kind of,
not just like a regular foodie. She likes all the disgusting shit, which I thought was pretty funny. Yeah.
She has a very open culinary mind.
Yes.
I'll say.
Yeah. Well, let's take this chance. We'll put a pin in talking about story stuff. We'll revisit that in the spoiler section. We will listen to a bit of music. We'll come back, talk about the way this game is presented, visuals, music, things like that. So we said at the top, both of us were really interested just from kind of seeing artwork from the game, whether it was promo art or a trailer or something like that. And I think, well, probably before you even kind of get into the story, you're going to realize that they're doing something crazy with the art style, the visuals, the colors, and things like that. So when we talk about the way Metaphor looks, what do you think stands out to you the most?
The portraits.
Character portraits.
Yeah, the character portraits. For me, this game reminded me a lot of Fire Emblem Three Houses. Visually, like especially the character models. It just had, and I don't know if it was because the change of more fantasy settings from modern that they're used to. But I actually think some aspects of the visuals were a downgrade over Persona 5. I think Persona 5 was very flashy. Everything looked very dynamic, like the individual dungeons and things. And granted, there's a lot more dungeons in Metaphor, but the overall world stuff, I was a little underwhelmed by. But the character portraits, I think, are some of the prettiest and most well done that Studio Zero has done. It's still a good looking game, but it didn't wow me like Persona 5 did.
It's a little bit busier, I think, than the previous games visually. There's a lot going on, and I think when I first stepped out into Grand Trad, the first big city that you play in, I kind of had like visual overload with everything going on, with all the different visuals, all the different like text popping up from all the NPCs on the street, stuff like that. But you are totally right. The character designs, their fashion is really, really cool. Art design, the principal credit is again to Shigenori Soejima, again, from those previous games as well. But the big difference that I've noticed from Persona 4 and 5, now that that's my kind of point of comparison, is those games had like very clear color schemes that they worked with, whereas Metaphor is a lot more colorful. There's a lot more going on rather than like a couple of key colors, we'll say. I would say if there are key colors, it would be like a pinkish red and like a teal type color. But that's not, like if you think Persona 5, you're like red, black. Yeah. That's the colors. Persona 4, yellow. That's the colors. Metaphor, there's a lot more going on for sure. So I can see how someone might prefer like the kind of style or tone that the art gives off in other ones. I really love the enemy designs in here. Love the enemy designs in the Persona games too. This is not new, but especially when they bring in the inspiration from Hieronymus Bosch into the more fucked up enemies that you fight.
And there are a lot.
There are a lot of them. They're extremely cool. Like,
yeah,
legitimately could not wait to see what the next boss fight would look like. That kind of thing. So if you're interested, if you didn't know the connection, or if you haven't played the game, the Garden of Earthly Delights, the triptych painting by Hieronymus Bosch, specifically the right side of it as you're looking at it, you'll find stuff that is just lifted from that painting and made into enemies in Metaphor. And it's really, really, really cool. Like, again, seeing what these monsters look like, it's just being like, sometimes you'll look at a monster and be like, how am I even supposed to fight this thing? I got that feeling a lot with these monsters.
And I just want to shout out the UI.
Yes.
The menus. Holy crap. That's another thing that this game just knocks out of the park, is the menus and the user interface. Like Studio Zero, I think, is probably the best UI designers in the industry.
They're the only people who we talk about the UI this much. These are the only games where we have specific bullet points to talk about UI in the outlines, is Persona and Metaphor.
Yeah, they are art like to themselves. But yeah, the monsters, the eggs with the fish people.
Oh god,
just it's like, I have no idea what this is, but we're gonna kill it.
Yeah, you've got like the egg monster and
the bouncing ears.
Yeah, the bouncing ears. Like on top of the egg monster's head, there's like a plate with people walking and a heart. And then when you break the eggshell, there's two frogs drinking wine inside of it. Like, what the fuck is happening in there? Every single time, loved it.
Yeah, very creative. Very, like you said, it made it so I was always looking forward to that next encounter, that next boss fight, just to see what royally fucked up thing I was about to kill.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's a good time. It's a good time.
Yeah. Loading screens are also super stylish too. Often just kind of shows your character strolling through a street or something like that. So, it feels like every part of the presentation, and I said this in the Persona 5 episode all those years ago, but it feels like every part that people would say is like boring about playing turn-based RPGs like this, they were like, we're just going to make it flashy as hell. We're going to make it cool to look at. And other games have taken their lead, like the turn-based Yakuza games, I think take big inspiration from this studio and how they make it exciting to be in turn-based combat and to navigate menus, which is not an exciting thing by nature, but they knock it out of the park.
Yeah.
Music in Metaphor is done by primarily, again, Shoji Meguro, as the previous games by the studio were. Very, very different sound from the Persona series. Instead of having kind of like poppy, jazzy type stuff, this soundtrack sounds grand. That's the big word that I would use to describe it, is grand. Regal, church-like, lots of like big songs that make it sound very important wherever you are. I really love the soundtrack. I don't want to, they're too different to say I like one more than the other from Meguro especially, but I love the soundtrack. I was listening to it this afternoon and just kind of like, yeah, banger, next song, banger, next song, banger. Fucking love this. And that's even before we get to the battle tracks with the chanting and stuff like that, which you said you particularly enjoyed.
Yeah. Honestly, it's the only track that I can hum to myself. Like, I could not, after being away from Metaphor for a couple months now since I beat it, I would probably be able to hum it if something's playing in the background, but I could not, like, off the top of my head right now be like, okay, I'm going to hum this city's song or track. I couldn't do it. It just didn't hit as well for it. I don't want to say it didn't hit well because I enjoyed it while I was listening to it. Nothing stuck.
Yeah. I think like, the Persona soundtracks are, a lot of them are poppy or stuff like that. Like that stuff does stick a little bit. That is what pop music is. It's designed to stick in your head. I got a lot of the songs from the towns and stuff stuck in my head as well. So I'd be walking around my house, just going da 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 da, and like probably driving my wife crazy. But I was also probably driving her crazy when I was doing the chants or my shitty imitation of them around the house. Those are so cool as a battle track. Like, as soon as you get into the first fight and that starts up, it's also in the main menu. That main menu song has it too. But as soon as it starts up in the battle, you're just like, what is this? Like, you've never heard anything in a game like this.
Let's go!
Even if you play lots of these games, like, it's a different kind of hype than, like an upbeat, maybe it's like a rock inspiration for a battle track or something like Uematsu does or something like that. This is real different, and I loved it.
Yeah. Have you seen the video, the Metaphor kind of webtoon by Pringus McDingus, where it's the cast goes into combat and it's like one of the big Minotaur enemies, and the track's going, and you see the protagonist, and then behind him you see Heisme, Stroll, and Hulkenberg just dancing to the tune.
Yeah.
And then, I died the first time I saw this video. It is so funny, and like the monk comes in and is singing the track. It's fantastic. So funny.
They actually did get a monk to come do the chants, and like when I first heard it, because I used to live in East Asia. So when I first heard the chants, I was like, oh, this sounds like shit I've heard at temples before. And then come to find out they did get a monk, an actual monk to come do it. People say it's in Esperanto. I have not fact checked that, but fair enough if it is. It's definitely not in English or Japanese, I don't think. Yeah. But it's really fucking cool. Like, you're probably going to be the thing that people remember the most about this soundtrack. But like, overall, there were so many points when I would get to a new area and just be like, man, the music is great right now. Really, really good. Even if I was like tired of other stuff in the game, maybe I'm grinding and like not super listening to the music, or maybe if I'm, wondering when the story is going to start again, pretty consistently loved the music here. So, Let's listen to a bit more of it. We've got to talk about gameplay still. So we'll have another music break. We'll come back and we'll talk about what it's like to play Metaphor ReFantazio. Gameplay in Metaphor ReFantazio follows the same kind of structure as the Persona games do. You have your life sim with a calendar, choosing how to spend your time as you kind of work toward deadlines for main story things. And then also you have the dungeon crawling and turn-based combat aspect of it as well. So let's talk about the kind of dungeon crawling and combat and job system and stuff first. So it is a combat system that is built around how many turns you get versus how many turns your opponent gets, trying to either give yourself extra turns by hitting elemental weaknesses or critical hits, or trying to take away turns from your opponents by dodging, blocking, stuff like that. So I thought this combat system was really, really good, and in my opinion, a huge step up over the Persona combat systems. They're similar, but the addition of the turn icons and like giving you more power to manipulate that was like, it unlocked like an extra layer of strategy that I really, really liked, especially as the battles got harder.
Yeah. Boy, let me tell you about Shin Megami Tensei.
Okay. Yeah, I know. I need to get into that.
Because that's really what it's pulled from, the press turn system that started in SMT3. But yeah, it was a slight tweak to implementation, but yeah, it's a good one for sure.
Yeah, I also enjoyed how you see enemies out on the out in the world as you're going through dungeons, and you can, like Persona 5, and 4, you can sneak up on them, get sneak attacks to get the jump on them. Or you can get ambushed if you're not paying attention and stuff like that. But new to this game is if you're higher level than the enemies, you can just kill them out in the dungeon and not need to go into turn-based combat at all, which you said you did a fair bit of grinding. I did a bunch of grinding. This was awesome for grinding because of the job system. There is more grind. If you want to get into the job system, you have to do a bit more grinding, I feel like, in here. And this really facilitated that for me. It was a great choice.
Yeah. It was great for keeping things speedy. It was great for money grinding. It was great for grinding different jobs. It was very good. I love game that it seems like more games are doing this, where you have a more action-based mode you can do outside of combat, or if you're too strong, it gives you an opportunity to grind without tons of downtime or forcing you into encounters. The Legend of Heroes Trails Through Daybreak game incorporates something similar that I really appreciated, along with the Cold Steel games. Well, actually, all the Trails games, now that I think about it, did something similar. And yeah, it respects the player's time, and I appreciate that.
In a game this long, any way that they actually do respect your time is good. One of the key things here with this is like, by doing that kind of one-hit kill, avoiding turn-based combat, it doesn't give you less experience for doing that. Which, like, I always like the system like in Earthbound, where like if you're super strong, you'll kill an enemy on the overworld, but it won't give you much experience. In Metaphor, they're like, no, you need that to level up your jobs, your archetypes. So you're not penalized for doing that. And so if you like to grind, which I do from time to time, I like to put on a podcast and grind through a dungeon for an hour or something like that. This game is really friendly towards like letting you do that efficiently, which is great. You said that you really like the job system. So what about this job system really spoke to you?
The main thing with job systems that I really enjoy is just the options and customizability in options it gives players. And I like that you fairly quickly could unlock new archetypes, this game's job systems for other characters. Like you didn't have to go on a quest for each character to unlock X job class, to be able to unlock it for other characters. And I like that it had the additional layer where once you have a job or an archetype unlocked, once you learn a skill, you could then pay money or resources to unlock that skill to then be slotted into other jobs. So it added another layer to that customizability in those options to really make each party and really each archetype your own. And I love that. The only downside, and I don't even want to necessarily say downside, it's not that strong of a feeling. The only thing I wish they would have done, and I hope they do in subsequent Metaphor games, is I was really hoping that each archetype would feel really distinctly different, specifically the upgraded archetypes for each one. Whereas it just felt like a better version of the previous one. I wanted a reason to go back to even the beginning archetypes.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Whereas once you get Magic Knight, or once you get the next level, or Magic Seeker, there was no real reason to go back to Seeker. And I would have liked a bit more variety or reason to go back to the other ones, as opposed, I wanted more of a Digimon evolution where each one was kind of wildly different than the last, but still kind of the flavor. Whereas Metaphor went more the Pokemon route, where it's just kind of better, but very much the same. But
I would
still
agree
great
with that. Yeah. And the one of the good things is that the different archetypes, I forget how many there are, 20 or so, they feel distinct from other types of archetypes, so it's not like you have, I just have like 5 very slightly different varieties of wizard or something like that. Like they all have different use cases. They all have different damage types that they do. So within like their own little mini lineage, we'll say it is kind of like Pokemon evolution, like you said, but they are differentiated from the other archetypes where they do feel different. They have different use cases and stuff. Even like the really weird ones, like the merchant and stuff like that, all have like very clear uses, and they all felt valuable at some point through the thing, which is good. You do get a lot of build variety out of it because there are so many, and every character can do everything except for each character has one like ultimate archetype that only they can do. Other than that, this is a game where anyone can be any job, but, and I don't like that in a lot of games. It's like, I prefer characters to have classes and battle utility that fits their character, as like a Final Fantasy IV or something like that. I like that kind of thing. But your characters all have clear strengths and weaknesses in Metaphor that makes it so like Stroll can be a wizard, but he's not going to be the best wizard. He's going to be better for physical stuff always. So like, I felt like characters had a lane that they could stay in. Within that lane, there's still a ton of creativity. So it's like a nice Goldilocks zone between those two types of RPGs, which I loved.
And I like how, for like your example of like a Stroll wizard, if you want to, for whatever reason, really want a Stroll wizard, maybe you want to test yourself or challenge yourself, you can still equip skills from his knight classes or his swordmaster classes onto your wizard, just for shits and giggles too. And I love that additional layer of flexibility.
Yeah, or the opposite. Like, maybe you're going through a dungeon and there's a bunch of enemies that are weak to fire, and you're just like, it would be really nice if Stroll could do a fire spell every now and then. You can do that, which is great. So, like, this job system is like fantastic. By the end, I had every skill maxed on basically every character, because when you max an archetype and then you continue to get level ups in that archetype, you get permanent stat boosts. So it's another way that they're like, hey, maybe this character's finished, trying out new jobs. Maybe you've settled on something. They can still progress as characters. They can still get stronger, that stuff. So like this is just like really awesome. No fusing of archetypes. I don't like fusing personas at all. So this is just very straightforward as far as like what job do you want them to be? What skills do you want them to have? Easy to understand. And then you go. It's really, really good. Oh, another thing about combat, I guess, real quick, is I really liked how combat difficulty progressed as you went through the game. And they introduce you to how to fight at the beginning, and they're like, this enemy's weak to electricity, hit them with electricity, get an extra turn. Stuff like that. And you're like, okay, cool. And like that's from the older games, the Persona games at least. I got to play Shin Megami Tensei so I can have like a better perspective on this type of combat. But then they introduce, buffs and debuffs start to get more valuable as you go. Elemental stuff is still good. By the late game, I felt like manipulating turns was the most important thing. Dodging and blocking attacks was more important than elemental damage, but elemental damage still had uses. But I had built up this like increase in how complex the combat gets to the point where there's some optional bosses that you can do, super bosses that were a fantastic challenge, I thought. And I'm not a super boss guy. I'm not fighting the emerald weapons or anything like that. But in Metaphor, I love the combat so much that I wanted to test it. And then, the final boss, really fucking difficult. I needed all the strategy that I could get, and just had a great time with this combat, these jobs, how they all played together. Like, and like using specific character strengths for very specific roles in combat, like really pushed all those buttons.
Yeah. It gave that strategic hit I like from games like this.
Yeah. And not one where maybe the battles require strategy, but every battle requires the same strategy. That's not how Metaphor felt to me, where like different enemies, different bosses especially, were all just like, I need to figure out how to best attack this specific thing. And for a game this long, I really appreciate that battles still felt different, even when I felt like I had a full grasp of the combat.
Yeah. I think to your point, there were certain like little tricks, like you and I talked, like having a dodge Heisme or something with their item or the skill equipped, where if they dodge, then it removes all the enemy's turns. Like that could be used for so many bosses. Like that's what helped get me through the like the super boss and some of the bonus fights.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like that alone made it so I could win. It was that was a trick that helped me get through multiple bosses, but I needed, like you said, I needed to tailor and swap out skills so I could hit weaknesses better, which would give me more turns, or the synergy skills. So I had to change the archetype so certain skills would, synergy skills would unlock, so I could use those for extra damage and or make an enemy weak to a certain element. I couldn't just rely on Heisme to dodge everything and then dodge to win, which I appreciated.
Yeah, it's fantastic, and it stays engaging the entire way through. Speaking of the kind of life sim elements of playing the game, how do you generally feel about these calendar-based, like choose how you want to spend your time, you've got a deadline coming up, so you need to get this done, stuff like that. How do you feel about this kind of structure?
It's usually a pretty big turnoff, honestly, for me. But also, I feel like in a lot of other games, it's far more restrictive than Metaphor was.
Yes.
And I think Metaphor was far more freeing it didn't lock you, like, I didn't get the pop-up and it was like, you have to study for an exam today, or you have to go to the library, or you have to do XYZ today, or you can't do anything for a week because you have exams. Things like that drive me nuts. I just want to, like, I want to get in. I want to play. I don't want to answer questions and then go to sleep.
I don't want to take a test. Yeah.
I loved how Metaphor, I could push things as much down to the wire as I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And really, it's like, you have to be here or do this by X date, and until you get there, have fun. I really appreciated that. I want all subsequent Persona games to take this as a kind of a template, because I think this had a calendar system, but it wasn't a game that necessarily felt like it was tied to a calendar system as the Persona games did, or the modern Persona games did.
Mm-hmm. It feels less limiting, and it might just be like you said, like in Metaphor, if they say you have 10 days to get this done, you actually do have 10 days. There isn't going to be a surprise that takes away evenings or something like that from you. So this felt more manageable to do all the social bonds, to do all the side quests. I didn't do all of them because I didn't use my time efficiently or something, but I got like all but 2 of the social bonds completely maxed out. I did all the side quests, fought all the super bosses, stuff like. I didn't feel like I, when I look back, I was like, well, I probably spent too much time, like, doing laundry or some shit I should have used that time more wisely. It's like, I wasted that time. It's not like the game didn't give me enough time, which is good. I also like how, let's say I want to prioritize raising a certain social rank. You just hang out with someone one time and it goes up 1 rank in here, instead of trying to guess, like, is it 2 more times? Is it 3 more times before I raise the rank up?
Yeah. Oh, this dude is talking about ramen. What are these 3 choices will he like the best about ramen? Or some asinine kind of response to a far out question. It's like, I don't know. This was really tasty ramen. I can't believe you thought that. This X place is so much better.
You're going to have to hang out with me one extra time now.
You think your bond's going to grow strong soon. It's like, God damn it.
All right, hey, I'm playing Persona 4, and it's like, your relationship isn't going to advance. Do you want to hang out with them? And I'm like, well, no, I guess not. I guess I don't want to. But in Metaphor, not an issue. Yeah. It feels like an easy thing to just streamline. That's one of the big takeaways from the gameplay part of this. This calendar-based structure, the life sim, the hangouts, the the combat, the dungeon crawling. It feels like they've just mastered this structure for a game. And so now they're free to cut the fat out and introduce cool new ways to spend your time, complications. Like, I love planning road trips in Metaphor. Loved planning road trips. I remember one specific part where I had like 4 side quests I wanted to do, and I realized I could do them all if I did this wild, like, 8-day road trip through the countryside.
Yeah.
And like planning based on the weather, because if there's bad weather, the dungeons are going to be harder. So it's like, the weather's it's going to work out. I'm going to have good weather the whole way around, and like planning all this stuff, then executing it, knocking out all these side quests. It felt awesome. Like, you get the strategy in the combat, but I also felt a really good strategy for like how to spend my time, versus the Personas where it's just like, it's the afternoon. Kanji wants to hang out. I guess I'll hang out with Kanji. Like, it's much more deliberate here in Metaphor.
Yeah. Do I want to go to the shrine to get a new skill card, or do I want to go eat a mega burger?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's good.
Yeah.
So all in all, I think that, like, again, the takeaway for gameplay is that, like, they're just so practiced in making this type of game that the bones are set, the fat has been trimmed, and like they added more flourishes in Metaphor that just made this like just really fun. A lot of these games are really compelling. I'll play them for like hours at a time if I have the time to do that. Metaphor felt even easier to do that because it was just like so smooth and like how I want to spend my time. Do I want to go do bounty side quests? Do I want to go, dungeon crawl, stuff like that? It's good. Also, the level design I thought was like pretty good in the big story dungeons.
The dungeons were fun.
Yeah.
The dungeons were fun. I like the butt, the intestines. That was funny. How the goal was just get to the anus. Yeah, I took
That's
a
how you know
screenshot
you're
of
playing
that.
a
It's
good
like
game.
this is good. But I'm curious, Dave, what would you want to see changed or adjusted in a hypothetical Metaphor 2 in terms of gameplay?
I think I would like more designed levels. Like the level design in here is definitely better than the games that came before it. The basic dungeons in Metaphor are better than Mementos in Persona 5 for sure. The story dungeons are like roughly similar to what I remember from the story dungeons in 5. I would like more of that. I would like more. I would like enemy placement to feel a little bit more like less, like more designed and less like, here's just 7 of these fuckers just, in a room jumping around. I guess like if I'm going to go through the dungeons, because one of the things about the dungeons too is like they try to make them so that you're limited in your resources as you're going. Like your magic points are your limiting resource, and you don't have good ways to refill it unless you grind a whole bunch and like stuff like, or like
the wizard, when you kill enemies in the world, will restore magic slowly.
Right. But the trade-off is the wizard's skill that you would kill enemies without going to battle is dog shit. So
really, I like the surrounding.
I hated it. It was like I always got interrupted and ambushed trying to do that. Much prefer the ones with the sword or like the faker with the throwing knives. Yeah. Stuff like that. I like that a lot. So I think that's like the biggest thing is like, I would like them to continue making all of the dungeons feel more engaging to go through with the knowledge that this is better than what came before it. I can't think of anything with the combat system that I would change or the job system. The life sim stuff I thought was like really streamlined and cool. So that's like the only thing that comes to mind. What about you?
For me, I'd like to see a bit more variety and kind of interesting archetypes outside of the lineages. I would like to see more of the trader, like the crazy fat abacus guy. Just because it was kind of interesting and it added some cool gameplay mechanics. I would like to see more interesting synergistic attacks. Them being in many cases just, I get an access to the next level up version of element spell X, Y, or Z, or I could attack everyone XYZ. But I think that's I was so kind of the Showtime attacks in Persona or the team up attacks in the Persona games were so bombastic. That I'd like a little bit more flair or just something a little bit more exciting. It doesn't have to be on the same scale or showmanship wise of Persona. But I would like a little bit more visual flair or interesting stuff than you have better fire attack,
Right. Those synergy attacks did get like they had very specific uses for me late in the game where they felt special. But I agree with you. Like at a certain point, I skipped animations when I was fighting in here because I had seen, the animation for the fire spell enough times. But I think that like there is something missing, I guess, compared with like the cartoony, brawl of like the all out attack or something like that. Yeah, I'm with you there. Well, let's wrap up the non-spoiler part of the episode by doing a kind of a section where we give a summary if we have, thoughts kind of still collecting. If you have any like final conclusions, let's hear those. But also, what type of person do you think that Metaphor would especially appeal to?
People that are, I think this is a RPG fan RPG. Yeah, I think if you are a fan of turn-based RPGs, this is definitely for you. I don't know if I would necessarily suggest this as a jumping in point if you're not into RPGs or just want to dabble, just because it is so long. But if you know like, okay, I kind of dig this genre. I want something larger. I think this is a great choice.
Yeah, I also think it's an RPG that might appeal to someone who like wants to like RPGs but thinks they're too slow to play. Not necessarily like the stories are too slow, because this one gets slow too, but like if you think that turn-based combat is too slow and you're tired of watching animations, I just played the demo for Final Fantasy VIII and watched those summon animations. Like if you think that shit is too slow, Metaphor is a solution to that because it's so snappy and stylish the way that the studio has kind of evolved into. So I think that that's a solution for some people. But other than that, like if you like the Persona series, if you like specifically the structure, the hangouts, the combat, the dungeon crawling and stuff, it's all here. And I think in a lot of cases it's better than it has ever been in Metaphor here. And if the thematic stuff that we kind of introduced earlier in the show appeals to you as well, it might be worth checking out what this game has to say about those too.
Yeah.
So it's a good game. It's a good game. There's criticisms that I have mostly concerned with story stuff and some characters and stuff like that, but it is still a really good game, and I don't want to like lose sight of that.
Yeah.
So
there's a reason it won so many awards.
Yeah.
All over the place.
Yeah, absolutely. It's warranted for sure. So, final thoughts are done. It's a recommendation from the both of us for sure, pretty easily.
Yeah.
So before we get into spoilers, we'll do our housekeeping here. And we always start by talking about the things that the guest does. So as I said at the top of the show, Scott is a writer, also has a podcast. So Scott, tell the people about the things that you do and where they can find you.
Yeah. So I write for a bunch of sites. Like we mentioned, I have stuff on RPG sites where I do a lot of my RPG writing, my video game stuff. Over on IGN, I do a lot of tabletop, like board games and card game stuff. I do similar things over at Games Radar. That's where actually my Metaphor preview was. But yeah, I do. And then I write all sorts of things over at irrationalpassions.com as well, which is also the home of my podcast, RPG University, where the main goal is to kind of reproduce that very much like this chilling on a couch with a friend, just gushing and nerding out about an RPG we love, while also giving tips and tricks for new players that might be interested in playing a game for the first time. Admittedly, it has been on a bit of a hiatus. It turns out that having a little baby and a toddler takes up a lot of your time and makes you tired. And the idea of organizing and booking things for a podcast and then editing on top of normal job, on top of the writing stuff, on top of running a reoccurring D&D campaign, on top of everything else is a lot. So it will be back along with, I want to start streaming again. I streamed for a long time over on Twitch, twitch.tv/SolidSnake120. But it's been a long time for that. But yeah, the main places you can find me, RPG site. I got some reviews coming out over there. I got a bunch of board game stuff coming out over on IGN, Games Radar, Irrational Passions. Those are the places to find me. And then RPG University can be found on any your main podcast services, Spotify and whatnot. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I've listened to RPG University. Lots of friends of Tales from the Backlog have been on that show as guests as well. So I really recommend that people will go check it out. And I'll put a link down in the show notes so that people can easily find the show, find you on Twitch, like you said, socials if you'd like, find your writing. Be on the lookout. A lot of stuff going on out there.
Oh, yeah. And I guess you can find me on Blue Sky on Twitter at Professor RPG.
There we go. So a recommendation to check out everything that Scott is doing. And if you like Tales from the Backlog, I think you'll like RPG University. If you like podcasts about RPGs, which you're an hour plus into an episode about an RPG. If you don't like RPGs, I would ask why you're here, but it's because you love the both of us so much. Yeah. So for this podcast, you can support the show the same way as always. If you're listening on podcast apps, ratings and reviews are super helpful. That will help people find the show. If you are listening or watching on YouTube, likes, comments, and subscribing to the show will help people find the show. And that's what we want to have happen. So all of those are very helpful. You can join the Discord server where we'll hopefully have some more conversations about Metaphor this week. While the game was new, we had a special channel with a bunch of discussion as people played through the game, and we'll keep doing that for new releases. So if you want to join up and join in with that, the Discord server is a great place to be. And finally, if you want to support monetarily, you can do that at patreon.com/realdavejackson, where you will get a bunch of treats for as little as $2 per month, starting with things like voting for what games I do on the show. So patreon.com/realdavejackson is the place. We are going to take a break, and when we come back, it will be full spoiler time for Metaphor ReFantazio. All right. Before we get to spoilers for Metaphor ReFantazio, I have one announcement and the customary thank yous. So, first of all, I did a guest appearance on the Pixelated Playgrounds podcast about Persona 4 Golden. So if you're listening to this, you want to hear my takes on another Atlus game, Persona 4 Golden, on Pixelated Playgrounds podcast. That was a great discussion. Please check it out. There's a link down in the show description so you can easily find it. And I want to say thank you to the wonderful patrons who help support the show. Big shout out to Chris Nelson, the Top 3 Podcast crew, Zulgeek, Chris Copleen, Eric Guess, Rick Firestone, Nick Fakori, Jill, Soccer, Cupcake, Kyle, Christian S., Matt aka Stormageddon, JD, Doug Leaf, Jason Emery, Brian Skirsha, Randall, Jenny E., Marcus O'Neill, David Stecco, Stefan, Drellish, Rob Smith, Rigamort, Ashton Ruby, a new patron, Levi, and many more. Thank you all so much for your support. It means the world to me. And if anyone out there would like to support the work I do, like them, once again, that's patreon.com/realdavejackson. And with all that being said, let's get back. Full spoiler time for Metaphor ReFantazio. All right, we're back, and it's full spoiler time for Metaphor ReFantazio. And the standard disclaimer holds here. We are not going to walk through the story in a linear way. We're actually going to talk about stuff that happens very late in the game in about 30 seconds. So if you haven't played, please go play it. But like, full spoilers are coming. It's a kind of a harder one to say, but like, same thing. Go play the game. The podcast will still be here when you get back. So I wanted to talk a little bit about Luis. Before we dive into thematic content too much, stuff like that, we brought up how we both thought Luis was a really good villain. And there was one moment for me that like really hammered this home and like really like sold me that I am invested in Luis as a villain. And it was the scene at the opera house. The portion before this was the portion of the game where I thought it was really dragging. Like, like there were obviously things happen, you meet characters, yada, yada, yada. But like, there wasn't a lot like driving the plot forward until the plan to go kill Luis at the opera house. Did you enjoy this part too?
Yeah. Like you said, it was more than just, okay, up until this point, it was how do we get close? How do we get around the royal magic that's protecting everybody? Like how do we do this? How do we figure this out? And seeing the party take a much more like going on the attack was welcome and needed, because like you said, it was kind of dragging at that point. It
reminded me of infiltrations like in Persona 5. That's what this mission was about. It was infiltrate his gauntlet runner to steal something, and then later it was infiltrate the opera house to do this assassination plan. And I just remember going through that opera house mission and just being like playing, watching, and suddenly realizing like I'm really nervous right now. I'm really nervous about how this is going to play out. And that's a sign that I was like, oh, Luis is a bad motherfucker. Like this, if this goes poorly, it's going to be really bad. And it kind of went off the rails for me. Like after you kill him and he comes back to life because it's like, oh, it's a fake and stuff. Like, I was like, okay, fine. But leading up to that, I knew I was sold on Luis as a villain because of how nervous I was.
Mm-hmm.
Like, is this actually going to work? You know?
That was one of the couple times where I was like, okay, who's the real big bad? Okay,
Yeah.
who's pulling Luis's strings? And then that happened, and then he came back and it's like, okay, what's gonna happen next? But yeah, there were some really good twists and moments with Luis. And
what was one that stood out to you?
I loved when it was revealed he was Elda.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool. And honestly, I just love that he was the big bad. Like,
yeah,
there was no like secret, like the Pope guy pulling the strings in the background, or the king was alive the whole time and doing all this. Like, I loved that it was just, nope, he's just a really bad, powerful dude. Like he is, like this is, yep. And that was one of the things I mentioned at the beginning, like how this got away from some of the tropes of fantasy, like RPGs. This was one of them, that there was no random big bad in the background.
Mm-hmm.
No, it was just Luis being a dick the entire game.
Mm-hmm.
And it got its little twists and surprises other ways.
Yeah, this is the genre, right? For they just keep escalating the scope of the villains basically until you're fighting a god. Like it's a stereotype, it's a meme for a reason. Like it happens in so many of these. Or you're fighting like the physical manifestation of a feeling or something like that. And it's in metaphor, it's just Luis. He's just evil. And he tries to like become more divine at the end of the game, but that's, I would still prefer that to just like an extra thing coming out at the last minute and just being like, surprise.
Yeah. It was in character form. Like everything he did, like even when he became the super big bad version of himself for the final encounters, like, okay, he used the royal magic, he absorbed it or some random whoop-de-doo. But like, yeah, I'm glad it wasn't like Luis was just the vessel of the Lord of Anxiety and you fought like the embodiment of anxiety or some BS. I'm glad that didn't happen.
And he gets his motivation too. So like he's an evil, like he's like a Kefka level evil asshole. Like, he's not as crazy as Kefka, but he's evil. Like he's that level of evil. But he gets his kind of motivations fleshed out in a way that Kefka and characters like Kefka don't really, you know, like that's chaotic evil for evil's sake. And Luis is, you find out he's Elda, like you said, and he comes from the same place that your character comes from, kind of, because your character is not a real person. Yeah, I joked, you're not fighting a manifestation of a feeling like you do in some games. You are a manifestation of a feeling in this game, which is a weird reveal.
Yeah.
It explains why your character is so perfect also. You don't have character flaws because you're the manifestations of like the wishes
stuff.
of the prince, you know?
Yeah. That was a cool reveal. And that whole part, just all the reveals of like, you're actually playing, like you are living in a super post apocalyptic Earth. Yeah. Where the Elda are actually humans, where the entire game you've been fighting the crazy monsters we were talking about, they're called humans, but you're actually the most human, and all the races are humans that didn't take shelter or something when bad stuff happened.
Yeah.
Tons of times ago, and they just kind of like evolved and changed into what they are, and it's like, oh, right, that's interesting.
Yeah, it was a cool reveal to find out, because like it might just be like a effect of this game being so long, but like you do that dragon temple, you go down, you see the ruins of Shinjuku, I think it was, and then like for a long time there's nothing else with that. Yeah. So like you're like, what that was 20 hours ago, like what was that? And then you do finally figure out what's going on with that, and it is as you said. And then the human monsters, those are the humans that have, some people get magic powers from anxiety, like you said. Some people turn into monsters because they did not handle their anxiety well.
What was it? The karma? Like, what were the floating evil MacGuffin particles? I'm trying to remember.
Magla?
Magla, that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the Magla is born of anxiety and then can warp you into a monster if you're not. This is where that Jungian psychology comes back. I think it's like it warps you if you are not in a position to like look to take on the world in a healthy way, etc. That's like the basis of what's going on in some of the Persona games as well. But that's kind of like the story of how the apocalypse happened was people, this anxiety, this Magla got out of control. There's a really good video by Max Durat. I don't want to just like word for word say what he said. Go watch his video. It's fantastic about this psychology angle to it. But the apocalypse was caused by people not confronting and working with their anxiety in a healthy way, looking for an easier way via Magla. And that destroys the world. It gives birth to the Elda. But everyone hates the Elda because, I don't know, they're close to the people who used to be, the people who destroyed the world or something. And so...
No, the Elda, like, are actual humans. Everyone else...
They're the they're like the unchanged descendants. Yeah. But everyone hates them. So they like burn down the place, and that's what kicks Luis on the path to being an evil, a villain, an evil villain, not just a villain, an evil villain, if you could believe it. So I thought that like finding out Luis's motivations was good. I didn't need it, but it was cool to find that like you kind of came from the same place in a way. And then you took two very different paths along the way to kind of like dealing with an injustice, a tragedy that was put on your people, we'll say.
I will say one thing I thought was kind of silly was how Luis fooled everybody basically with a headband.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like that never shifted. Like in everything he was doing, like he was this general and he fought on these wars and he was so successful. Like it never just like his horns never like skewed slightly.
Yeah.
Like that.
Hey, Luis, your horns are kind of crooked, buddy. What's going on?
Hey, why are your horns backwards, dude?
Yeah. Yeah. You never had a hangover and put them on backwards or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that part was kind of silly. Like I like the reveal that it's like I was Elda the whole time, but it's like I would have preferred if you're a super powerful wizard. Why not just do like an illusion or something?
Yeah.
Nah, dude, headbands.
That's why Luis always moves so slowly and confidently because he doesn't want no sudden movements to shift the headband.
Well, he fell through a damn skylight at the
That's
opera.
True. He did. He did get harpooned through the chest.
Anywhere? Yeah. Those didn't move.
Magnets.
The fudge.
I don't know.
That's the real fantasy aspect of this game. His headband doesn't move. One thing that I felt playing, I felt like Basilio came into the party way too late.
Agreed.
Like, I love the dynamic between him and his brother, but he arrived so late, I didn't care. Like, I rushed through his social stuff just to get the max point, but like to try and get his archetypes unlocked at that point, it was like I was over all that. It's like, okay, I have my guy that hits things really hard. I didn't care much about Basilio when he entered my party.
No, me either. I think that there's an upper limit as to like how late someone can join your party and have me be like really invested in them and really want to spend the time to make them a part of my battle strategy and get all their archetypes. I didn't max out Basilio's social bonds because there were two that I didn't max out. I didn't max out him and I didn't max out Katharina because I didn't care about them as characters. And when I was choosing who to spend my time with, especially late in the game when I figured out I was like up against it and I needed to be like hyper efficient. It was just like, well, Basilio's at level 2 and I could either get Basilio leveled up or I could max out these other 5 characters that are all at level 8. I'm just going to go do those other characters. I don't really care about Basilio anyway. So yeah, I'm with you.
I cared about him much more as an NPC than I ever did as a character in my party.
I didn't like him and his brother as characters either. They seemed very during the part where they were NPCs, they seemed very one note to me. And when Basilio joined the party, he always felt like he was, he's that guy that gets cut out of the picture, you know?
Yeah.
Like that's how he felt to me.
I liked his brother. I liked Fidelio more than I liked Basilio because I liked how Fidelio was like, I don't really trust you. And I don't, like, you had to kind of earn his trust where Basilio just did whatever his brother said. He was kind of like the dumb dog just that follows around its master kind of thing.
Yeah.
I thought his brother was a lot more interesting because he was so much more devoted to Luis. And the fact that he had a lot more growth, I think, as a character, kind of pushing, sacrificing himself, hurting himself to protect the others on the ship from the human octopus thing. I would have preferred him to be my party member than Basilio, but regardless, Basilio entered the party way too late for me.
Yeah. After Yufa was the last one where I was like, okay, you're part of the group. I care about what's going on with your story. I don't think I maxed her either. It was like her, Basilio, and Katharina. I didn't max out. Everyone else I was good with. Speaking of characters, I guess, do you have any favorite storylines for the side characters as you kind of hang out with them and work through their problems, basically?
I really liked Heisme. I like everything, trying to find a final resting place for his son, finding out what happened to his son. That was one of the things that like really hit, that his son was basically a victim of he was basically lynched. He was wrong place, wrong time, wrong person, wrong type of person, I guess. And him kind of dealing with that, like how he went in essence to the cave where you find him to die. I really liked Heisme as a character. I thought his was very impactful to me.
Yeah.
And I really like, plus he was just MVP of my party in a lot of situations.
He's definitely was, besides the protagonist, the MVP in battle for sure, during the hardest fights, but also just like he is the most memorable character. The combination of visual design, because he's like this bat creature, but also the voice acting is fucking awesome for Heisme. Yeah. His side story is the best side story, like by a pretty wide margin, I think. Like, I liked Stroll's side story. I also liked Alfonso's side story.
Was pretty good, yeah.
Yeah. But like Hulkenberg's was fine. You know, it wasn't super affecting. I kind of like the guy, I forget his name, but the guy who's like running one of the towns and he's like your confidant.
Oh, Elphus? Elphus, the guard?
Yeah, who like he becomes the leader and he has a bunch of problems as a leader. I felt like that kind of mirrored, like, because your goal is to become the king, and his is like a little micro version of like what might happen if you become the king. So I kind of like that. But like, I don't even remember most of the storylines, to be honest. I didn't write them in the notes, and if I don't remember them a month later, like, how much did I really enjoy them? Heisme's is the clear winner. It's the only one that I felt any kind of like strong emotion towards, as far as like a character story goes.
I liked Maria's too. Her trying, I thought hers was pretty good too. Her working through her grief of Grius's death. Yeah. And trying to open up and kind of befriend people and how she would grow from that. I thought that hers was pretty good too.
Yeah. She's a good kid. Good video game child.
Good kid.
Easier said than done, I think. So yeah, Maria's was good. Yeah. Heisme's also kind of stuck out to me because his race, the UG, are also kind of like ostracized and disliked by a lot of people around the land. So like I said, I think that inequality theme storyline kind of goes underdeveloped and doesn't get explored that much, but Heisme's story does deal with that. Deals with, you know, how do I describe this? His village of, you know, isolationists who don't trust anybody, basically. That stuff was good. So I think he's the winner for sure.
talked about more yet. I'm curious what you thought about all the stuff with more, but I'm guessing that's coming up.
Yeah, let's talk about it. So let's talk about Utopia and this game's kind of take on Utopia and idealism. I think that all wraps together with More. More is the face of this. So More is named after Thomas More, who wrote the book Utopia. And More is like someone who can't remember who he is. He's the classic, like, you know, hang out with me and help me remember who I am character. Turns out he's the king. The king died and then became More in a different form to help you through this, because you're the king's son. Your character is also the king's son. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So what did you think of this reveal that, first of all, before we talk about Utopia and all that stuff, what do you think of the reveal that this is actually the king trying to, well, the actual goal of More is really interesting too. We'll get there. Yeah.
I thought he was going to be I thought he was going to have some sort of connection with Louise. I thought More was going to be the big bad. I thought there was going to be some, like, the whole thing was kind of an illusion and you were going to modern day Tokyo. Just with the things you saw, I thought something was going to happen and the end fight was going to be in modern day Tokyo. I'm glad that didn't happen. But no, I thought it was a really good kind of reveal. I like the kind of the conflict between you and him at the end, where he's trying to protect you and keep you somewhere safe. And like, the prince is like, no, I have to go back to my friends. Like, I have to do this. And it's like a father trying to protect his child. Yeah. I liked him as a character. It was one of those interesting things where, like, even from the get-go, it's like, okay, there's going to be something with this guy. Like, there's something. And I liked the little bits it would drop every time you ranked him up, and then when it was revealed, I was like, okay, that was kind of cool. It wasn't what I was expecting. And I thought it was good. I liked More.
Yeah. On the subject of him being your father and trying to protect you by, at the end, you know, taking you to this modern day Tokyo type thing, like the walls Utopia. Fall away and shows you, the Utopia, and trying to give you this offer, very similar to something from Persona 5 Royal, where it's like, this fake world is better than your real world. This is Utopia. You can have a comfortable life here. Why not stay here? And it comes from, like you said, that fatherly place where I think that he genuinely means that as like, you are my son. I can save you in a way by giving you this safe place to live. And then, you know, your character decides that the real world is fucked up, but it's worth fighting for. We have to go back, stuff like that. But I really liked that kind of reveal. So like the reveal that you're the king's son didn't really do anything for me if that's all it was. But then the way it ties into how the game talks about utopia and idealism, and like the idea, the king wants to save you from this because he used to be just like you. The king was also an idealist who wanted change for the better in the world and failed. And like he found it too hard to actually get anything done. And that kind of ground him down. And then his son got cursed, and that like completely broke him.
Well, it was his wife dying.
His wife died. Yeah, part of that.
And that's kind of what set him on. It's like, oh my gosh. And then he thought his son died. And that's what like really is like, oh, well, I'm
right. But
I have no point in living. Yeah.
Yeah. Before that, he had like great intentions to like help the people of the land. And he just couldn't do it. It was too hard. And that failure wore on him as well. And so I think he sees your character as, you know, trying the same thing. And he probably views it as going down the same path of ruin that he went down. Yeah. And so he wants to try and save you from that. And so the way they tied all those things together, I thought was really good. Like, it's a really good storyline that they came up with here that, like, I think a lot of RPGs like this, you play as like a well-meaning character who's going to save the world and, you know, make life better for everybody. So many games like this, right?
Yeah, power of friendship's going to Love and friendship, man.
Yeah. And then the king is an example of like, hey, I used to be like you and it sucked. I couldn't get anything done. And my life, like through that and then other reasons, my life was basically ruined. So I want to stop you from making the same mistake. And so the game is kind of commenting on like, is it actually worth it to take this on? Because it's going to be difficult. You'll probably fail. Is it still worth it to try? The answer from your protagonist is yes. We have to.
Yeah. It was a very cool reveal and a nice surprise. It wasn't what I expected it to be. Yeah. Both after it was revealed and prior.
For sure. It also has the connections Moore did with the real story of Utopia, which I thought was kind of cool. There's a character in the book Utopia named Hythlodius. That's the name of the king. So it was another connection between the two of those. And it kind of made me interested in looking up like, okay, so in our game, there is a book showing a utopia. And the utopia in the game is our real world. And then it's based on a book, Utopia, that shows their version of a utopian society. So I read a little bit about that. In the book Utopia, the ideal society is communist, and everybody gets slaves, which that sucks. So the old version of the old idea of Utopia was not all the way there, we'll say, but it was born out of Thomas More living under the the iron fist of the Catholic Church, if I remember right. So the same type of thing. And I think Thomas More got executed, not because of the book, but eventually got executed. So, so kind of similar to the king in here, you know, like this type of idealism only leads to ruin type of thing, which I thought was really good. Like, I love the way that they explored this.
I've never read it, so I can't speak to that. One thing I will say is I thought it was a cool reveal how you are the prince, but I wish the protagonist wasn't the prince, because the whole thing was the king has died, we're resorting to democracy to elect a new person, and it just goes back to the monarchy.
Right.
Like, I know they still vote for it, but it's like, I'm torn on how I feel about you being like the spirit of the prince rejoined for this democratic election.
So before they reveal that you're the prince, there's a whole storyline where you're impersonating the prince. And I thought that storyline was really fucking stupid. Yeah. But then when you find out you are the prince, I agree with you that like, I think the story would be more interesting if you were just a nobody who, you know, brought these ideas and kind of organically
shared your book to everyone, made them all realize that
literally everybody
is cool.
Going door to door, just like, here, read a few pages. Vote for me.
A Jehovah Witness.
Yes, exactly. That's what we want. But that said, like I said, I did like, you know, you're the prince, therefore you're the king's son. I did like how that tied in with the Utopia theme and stuff like that. So it's not like I hate every aspect of it, but it was more compelling to me when you were a nobody than like, oh, you're the rightful prince and people are just going to vote for you because you're the rightful prince now, if you can convince them that that's the truth. Interesting you said that, though, about the monarchy. I've seen this around a lot as a criticism of the story, and they never said they were doing a democracy. Like, it was always whoever has the most support of the people, a democratic election, will then be the king. So, like, I've seen this as a criticism that people say the story's dumb because they go to a monarchy. And like, not that that's exactly what you said, but they never said they were doing democracy in the game. They were always like, we're picking a king just through democratic process.
Right. I guess I felt like this was a brand new thing. So before it was very much a by birth sort of passage from one to the next, and this was like, oh, we can vote, we have a say, this could mean something, and then it just returns back to blood right. And granted, you still have to earn people's respect and whatnot. I just thought it was interesting. It was like you said, I liked it when you were just a random Elda who, like, you happened to be friends with the prince, but you were random Elda boy.
it's a pretty small little like community of Elda down there in that forest. Like everyone was probably friends with the prince down there. So it is interesting that they finished the game and we're back to a monarchy. So then you would think like, okay, so am I going to be a better king than the previous king? Which like you want to assume that that's the case, but the previous king also, what you learn, had like great ideas for how he wanted to like make life better for everybody. So are you going to have more success than the previous king? The church is gone. So that will probably help. Or the church is very weakened. The church was a big thorn in the king's side. But like, did you finish the game thinking that like things are definitely on the upswing for Uchronia now that your character is the king?
It's one of those things where it's like everything looks rosy at the end of an RPG. Like, yeah. I don't...
That's true.
It's like, yeah, at some point it'll probably fester and fall apart and something crazy, but we'll never see it. So it's like, yeah, I believe in friendship and discrimination's gone, folks. I mean, it's going down. I guess I don't want to say I'm jaded, but it's just like whatever. It's an ending to an RPG. I did find it funny how even after you're king, like you still go out among the townsfolk. You still like get dressed up and people still don't realize you're the king. You're just like, I'm going out.
I wonder if people are still racist to you on the street if they don't know you're the king.
Yeah. Well, it's like how many Elda? I got the sense the entire game there ain't many Elda. Like everyone's like, you're the first Elda I've ever seen, and then suddenly you just see an Elda walking around, and you have an Elda king. You're not gonna be like, you're the king, aren't you?
Yeah. Speaking of feeling jaded, I wanted to ask you about the ending, like the ending of the game, the last screen, basically. So we kind of talked about how your character arrives at the idea that even though idealism and trying to make a utopia is impossible, you still have to try. You still have to make the world better. So the game kind of like, there's like a message to you, the player, which by the way, that whole thing of like, you enter your name, you're the one playing, very little happened with that. I was pretty disappointed with that as a thing I thought was going to be a big deal in here. But at the end, the writers kind of speak directly to you. And they say, there's a quote, they say, I hope the promise of our world echoes in you after you've, set up this brand new, hopefully good monarchy. With all my heart, I hope that fantasy gives you strength, onward, fearless, into a world unknown. The game, I think, wants you to feel optimistic about the state of our own real world. And like, one of the things I think they want you to think about is like, if this game's book of utopia is our real world, that means that we've come a long way. Look at us. Look at the progress we've made. Don't you feel optimistic going forward? And I saw that and I was like, Trump just won the fucking election. No, I don't feel optimistic.
Yeah. It's like, are you saying I should go around the country or the world to recruit a team of random ethnicities to overthrow the president?
Yeah. This was hard. This is hard for me to fully get on board with because like I understand what they're saying and I also understand they're not speaking to Americans specifically here.
Yeah.
But me as an American, I only have the perspective that I have. I saw this message and I was like, I really wish I could. I wish I could share the optimism. I really wish I could.
Right now, I'm my optimism is more geared towards, man, I'd totally be down if more could send me to a paradise that isn't the real world. That'd be pretty awesome.
Maybe send me to Uchronia with this new king.
Yeah, I want magic powers.
Yeah. Like, what did you feel when you read that? Were you kind of just like, ah, man, I don't know?
I honestly didn't give it much thought. I was just like, okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I honestly didn't give it much thought one way or the other. It's like you said, putting in my name at the beginning, really, the most interesting thing was that my name was in the book of the Seeker. I was really hoping that every archetype would have the little story associated with it, like finding out like what the source, like the inspiration of each archetype was, kind of like how you had the little book that would slowly get more chapters or pages that talked about like the original Seeker. I thought that was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I was hoping each archetype would have something similar, or at least the main characters' lineages of archetypes would have something similar. It's like, it doesn't, and that's kind of a bummer.
It would be cool, because like one of the cool things, if you really want to do it in Persona, is like the personas come from real world religion and mythology and stuff like that. So you can like read the stories behind those things if you're not familiar. It's cool, and if you're interested. And I agree. I think it would be cool to maybe if you're able to read like, you know, about the original brawler, and then it tells a story of a mythological figure named Mike Tyson or something like that.
Yeah.
It's like you know, very clearly talking about Mike Tyson, but maybe not using the name. Like it'd be really cool if you could read through those, or, you know, there's probably analogs to what if the wizard or the mage or whatever was fucking Merlin, or they can't use Gandalf, but Merlin. Yeah. Something public domain.
And I don't know why they had that little Seeker book with not having everything else, like for the other archetypes. Like it was cool, but it didn't reveal anything interesting. It just had my name, like I was the Seeker. I don't know. I don't remember it adding anything other than a cool little lore about a single archetype.
Yeah. I think it is as simple as just like you input your name and then they plug that into the name of the Seeker when they're like, oh, this was the great hero, the original Seeker, Dave. And I was like,
yeah,
that's it. I thought there was going to be much more of that meta thing in there. I mean, they ask you before you even play the game, they ask you to put your name in, and it feels important what you're doing. And it's, you know, as far as like involving me as a real person in the story of the game, this is not very impactful.
A wasted gimmick.
The only other kind of like thing that I wanted to touch on is this game's take on elections, and then the theme of anxiety, kind of revisiting that. And so we already talked a little bit about how anxiety fuels the magla, and the magla can get out of control, especially if you are not in tune with your true self in the psychological sense, we'll say. The other part of that is that the magla, the anxiety, fuels Luis's rise to the top as in the latter half of the game, after it's basically just you and Luis. And I forget what they call it, but like there's this gloom that goes over the entire world. And it's like a manifestation. It's like if the anxiety of a country became weather, that's what it is. And that this is caused by the people's anxiety that is caused by like the state of how things are with the election. And Luis feeds on that, and it makes him more powerful. And that's the thing that helps him become the god Luis at the end of the game. And I just thought that was a really excellent observation as to how political campaigns often work. And like, I know I'm coming at this from the American perspective, not an American-made game. They're not making it about the American election cycle. I'm sure it happens all over the place. It's a way to gain support, is to get people riled up and capitalize on what they're afraid of. And I thought that was very, very real, and like very cool how they approach the theme of anxiety on like multiple axes throughout this game.
It was such an interesting... A little story just regarding this. When we were at the press event, I was sitting It was in this beautiful like old church. We were having the description and kind of the team tell us about the themes and whatnot. So I'm in a room full of fellow journalists and peers, many of whom had just found out they had been let go or have experienced being let go from various websites. And the team talking about how the theme of this game is anxiety. People laughed. It was just like so on the nose with everything that was going on. But I'll always, the idea of anxiety becoming some sort of power will never not be funny to me.
I like it as anxiety becomes a power that the evil and powerful can capitalize on to kind of manipulate people. I think that's extremely good as a story thing.
Yeah.
Anxiety bearing out this thing that then can be used to give you magic powers is a little bit silly. Like I think you said earlier, for sure. Yeah. I can tell, I can see them saying the theme is anxiety and people being like, what does that even mean? Like, I can see that as, you know, one word doesn't quite describe what they're actually doing with it. And not that they would spoil the story in a press event anyway, but I can see people who are going through real anxieties about their livelihood, then seeing that like, oh, we're turning this into the theme of the game and it gives you magic powers or something. I can see the skepticism for sure.
I never grasped like why this was the visualization, but why did their hearts that they ripped out look like mechanical things? I never got that.
I never got that either. It's a good question. I should have dug into it. Hopefully someone makes a video or something.
Like I get in Persona, like Persona 5, they're ripping off their mask. They're ripping off the facade that they're presenting to the world. Like it's symbolic. The cards, like the different Persona, like I get that in those. Like, I don't know, like why are they reaching into their chest and pulling out like a pocket watch heart or like a clockwork heart?
Yeah.
I didn't get it because I guess the archetypes kind of looked robotic-ish.
They do.
But even then, I don't know why.
Right.
But
because you would think like the fabled hero from the book, the original Seeker, that wasn't a robot, right? It was a guy.
Old dude.
Yeah. That's a good question. That's something that I hope someone listening, if you know the answer, jump in Discord and tell me, or like hit me up on Blue Sky and tell me. I am like legitimately curious, and I may or may not remember to look it up when the podcast is over.
Yeah. It's like the designs are cool. I have no issues with the designs. I'm just like, why?
Yeah.
I'm intrigued.
More intrigued than saying that they, that they did a poor job of storytelling with that or something. It's just weird.
Yeah.
Was there anything else about the story in Metaphor that you thought was noteworthy? Or we didn't talk about the battle strategy in the late game, if we want to nerd out about that for a little bit.
Yeah. Go for it.
So you did all the dragons and the Dark Link fight. I forget what they actually call it, but it's Dark Link. We know what Dark Link is. So who was your like party mainstays toward the end, and what were they doing?
Really, it was always Stroll, Hulkenberg, Heisman, and Hero.
Okay.
The protagonist. I would use Hulkenberg was my main healer because she could soak up damage. As I had her as her magic knight, one of her like higher up magic. I think the paladin. I had her as a paladin. Stroll was just the sword master, the samurai, and then royal sword master. Just my physical damage dealer. Heisman was my dodge tank, so he would draw aggro, dodge, and then win. And then occasionally do some debuffs. And then Hero, I would have as prince and be my magic guy. I put all my points into magic. So just kind of well-rounded a bit. I never really used Yuna or Yufa, and Basilia. We talked earlier about it, but it was just those main four really.
Gotcha. So I used everybody except Basilio pretty regularly through like dungeons and stuff, just to like refresh. Someone's out of MP, put Stroll in there. And like, I think I forgot or like didn't know for a long time that you can switch people out in combat and just pay a, very small penalty for doing that, and eventually no penalty. So my like big boss killing team was Heismay as the dodge tank, the protagonist as the prince, and the protagonist was the main damage dealer. Hulkenberg was a tank and healer, and also like had some stuff she could do if she had an attack turn open. And then I used Juna instead of Stroll. And Juno was a buff and debuff machine, basically.
Nice.
And also a really strong mage, and she had the synergy attacks that could create elemental weaknesses, I think. So that was handy from time to time also. If it's like, I have a couple extra turns, let me like set something up later down the line that's really going to pay off. And like the fight against the Dark Link, which is on a timer. So it was less like I'm in danger of dying. It's more like I need to kill this thing faster.
That fight made me so angry. Well, what frustrated me was, okay, so after a certain point, after his life goes down so much, he does the attack that insta-kills your whole party. It's like, okay, that's frustrating. I cooked the thing that keeps your party, they survive a fatal hit. If you have that, he then does the attack twice.
Oh, because he does like the soul scream or whatever, so he has a bunch of turns?
No, like he has, and then he does the attack that on your prince, you can only do once per combat, but he can do multiple times. Yeah. So he does it, everyone dies, but if you have the thing cooked where you survive a fatal hit, he just does the attack again. And I was like, oh, fuck you.
It's a developer saying, fuck you, Scott. They're saying, like, you can't cook your way out of this.
I was like, no, you can't get around this. It's like, well, damn it. So that was frustrating. And then it was, okay,
I can
timing.
see that. Yeah. It's it never feels good when you feel like they're not following the same rules that you have to follow, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That fight was harder than the final boss. That was like one of my most satisfying RPG fights. Like it took everything I had ever learned about the combat system and then some to beat it. The final boss, I was never in danger of losing. It was just a matter of like, I need to kill this thing before I run out of items to restore MP. Like it was just really long. Probably because I was highly leveled and Heismay could dodge everything. Heismay had the skill from the Night Tree where he would draw all the aggro and then he'd just dodge basically everything. And his like Super Ninja archetype.
Royal Thief, I think it was.
Yeah, Royal Thief. Super Ninja. Royal Thief, yeah. If he dodges, it like takes 4 turn icons away. It's like something crazy. So
all turn icons.
Oh, is it all of them?
It's
so there we go.
I use it for a lot of the dragons because like after Soul Scream or something, Heismay would dodge and there goes their 7 turns or 7 plus turns. I would
really curious like how people would beat these fights without Heismay just nuking all their turns, because that's felt like it doesn't feel like cheating because they gave me that. They obviously wanted Heismay to do that if he dodges, if you get the final archetype, but there's an accessory
that does the same thing. And that's what I was using most of the time, because I honestly kept Heismay as just as like his main early thieves, because you would level up the base archetypes faster and they would generate the same, regardless of what level of archetype they're at. When they max out and level up again, you would get the 1000 SP or whatever item that you could use. But having him stay on base thief, or anyone that's how I would grind. I would change everyone to base level archetypes and then just kill things in the field to quickly generate those SP giving items. And that's how I would level up all my higher level archetypes, is just those items over and over again. But yeah, I had the item that when you dodge, you take away all enemy press turns.
I think you told me about that item and I looked and I didn't have it. And then I was like, I'm not going to get it. I probably
Yeah.
missed it somehow, but I got through it. But I would be curious, like, how do people beat those final things? Aside from the one dragon where it does like a crazy fire attack, and if you repel it, it'll kill itself in one hit. Aside from that one, Dodge Tank Heisme seemed like the way. So I would be curious, like, what other strategies people had for those final things, because they're really, really hard. So anything else about Metaphor that you want to touch on before we go?
Bravo to Studio Zero for, like, in many ways it felt like Fantasy Persona, but in other ways it very much felt like its own thing. And I think they did a wonderful job as a first attempt at a lot of these systems, at a job system, at kind of the new approach to time management. I think they did a really, really good job. And I'd like to see, especially the time management, be taken over and adopted by, like, Persona 6.
I was just going to ask you, like, is there anything from here that, like, if they're going to continue with Metaphor games, obviously they're going to continue with this stuff, but is there anything that you think is going to make the leap back over into Persona? Like, maybe like the streamlining of some of the social activities, kind of freeing up the calendar a little bit more. Because you're like, if it's Persona, you're still going to have to do school trips and shit like that. But
Persona 2, you weren't high school kids, is all I'm going to say. You were like adults. But those were Persona 1 and 2, and the 2 duology were vastly different. I would love them to see them adopt. In Persona 6, I'm fine if the main character can have, like, tons of different persona, but I would love it if in Persona 6 you could swap around your party's personas amongst themselves to kind of do the customization, maybe a job system light in Persona, just because I love the options it provides. But yeah, I think my main thing, like, if I could pick only one thing, just a much more open time schedule. And
that's fair.
I really liked how fast you got into the action in Metaphor over Persona.
Yeah, I can see that. I was definitely more motivated to go do side combat related stuff in Metaphor. And so, I don't know, like, those things felt more worth my time and less like, okay, I'm just going to go grind a dungeon for a couple hours or something like that. So yeah, I'm with you. I think they would be dumb not to kind of shift some stuff over into the Persona series. And who knows how far out Persona 6 is, but, you know, they're being co-developed for a certain amount of time. So hopefully they did take some ideas. But I'm happy with this game. The spoiler section was half criticism, half I love what they did here, but that's kind of the nature of a story that tries a lot of stuff, I think. Some's going to be good. Some's probably going to be underdeveloped. Some might be a little bit silly, but that's the way it goes. I appreciate you doing this show with me, man. It's been a good time.
No, I'm glad we could. It's been a blast getting to talk about Metaphor again and think back to it. It was a fantastic game, and I can't wait to... I mean, Studio Zero is just a rock star, and it's wild how... You mentioned at the top of the show, like, you had, like, growing up, you hadn't heard of Atlus, and it reminds me that, for the longest time, Atlus was such a niche, unknown kind of, unless you were big into, like, JRPGs or the very specific games that Atlus released, you really wouldn't hear of them. And it's like, now, like, Atlus's games are beating out Final Fantasies for a lot of awards, and it's just wild how big and how prestigious really Atlus has become, thanks to Persona and thanks to Metaphor and their games. It's wild to think that they're much more of a common name now.
For sure, yeah. And I can't wait to see what they do next. Persona 6, Metaphor 2, anything else they're cooking up, I'm in. And I got to get on Shin Megami Tensei. Maybe I'll invite you back sometime if I do a Shin Megami Tensei game. But maybe,
or Etchy and Odyssey. I love those games. They have a bunch of stuff.
We didn't mention, I mean, I don't have anything more to say about it, but did you notice like the Etrian Odyssey Easter egg in Metaphor?
I didn't notice the Etrian Odyssey Easter egg. I did think it was funny how Katharina in this is based off of like an Easter egg of the third Catherine in the Catherine Full Body game. I thought that was funny.
Yeah, I did play that. So before this, my two Atlus experiences were Catherine and Persona 5.
Mm-hmm.
But and I haven't played Etrian Odyssey, so this is not my observation, but the Dragon Temple layout is the same as
oh, really?
An Etrian Odyssey. Also, the island is called Eritrea or something like that. So it's like very, very similar. So
that's cool.
They're throwing little Easter eggs for the long time sickos, we'll say.
That's cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you again for coming on and doing this. It's been a long time coming, and it's been a good time talking about it with you. So I appreciate you taking the time again.
No, I thank you so much, Dave, for having me on. This was great. It was worth the wait. It's been a blast.
Absolutely. And at the end of the show, I'll give the call, like I said earlier, to check down in the show notes for everything that Scott is doing, whether it be writing, podcasting, or anything like that. Good guy. Check out the things he does. I think you'll find something to like. And as always, if you listen to the end of the show, you are my hero. And tune in next week for the next game to come out of the backlog.
Hey, you there! This is Nomad speaking. If you love retro video games and you're itching for some nostalgia, check out the Retro Wildlands podcast. In each episode, I'll use game music and sound to pull you into the gaming experience while I share my own thoughts and maybe a few memories. It's a great way to relive one of your favorite games or learn about a new one. Check out the Retro Wildlands podcast at superpodnetwork.com or wherever you listen to your podcast.
Do you feel like you're the only person in your circle who wants to go deep about video games regularly?
We were like that too, until now.
Welcome to Crossplay Conversations, the brand new bi-weekly topical video game podcast from Luke Lewis,
Joseph Hooper,
and Jacob McCoy.
With many years of breaking it down separately on shows like the Left Behind Game Club, Player Podcast, and Lukewarm Games, the gang is finally coming together to publish their gaming group chat in audio form every other week.
Expect roundtable reviews of the latest games, profiles of upcoming indies, and insightful conversations about essential topics in the video game industry. All with a mostly positive, insightful, and fun style.
Help us out by subscribing on your podcast platform of choice to get the first episodes delivered straight to your feed.
And follow us on Twitter at Crossplay Convos for updates about the show.
Cheers and happy gaming.